Okay, I think that makes me live. We'll see if it pops up here in the window in a moment. But my name is Shane Brinkman-Davis, and I am a consultant here at GenUI today, GenUI.co, and also I have my own company, Imi Kimi, and I love building developer tools that are well designed, that are beautiful, that really ultimately impact our productivity. And I like doing these live codes as a place to sort of share what I do and how I think about things and how I dive in um, when I make big, huge projects like ArtSuite.js or Caffeine Script as a programming language. But today, I am coming back around to this project I've been sort of poking at for the past couple iterations, the real-world example app for React and Redux. And I have this nagging suspicion that I kind of want to inspect. And I thought I might do that with you here. So let's switch this at the moment. I'm going to go ahead and give us a bigger font. So I'm going to go and just fire up this app. Excuse me. For those of you who aren't familiar with this real-world app, it's a pretty cool pass at coming up with a real-world application and then implementing it in all of the different web frameworks and beyond. And they both do server-side and client-side, and I think they also have implementations on iOS and Android. But today we're focusing on their flagship demonstration, which is React Redux. Last time I did a refactor of converting Redux from the old class style to the newer hooks style, and I'm working within that pull library at the moment. That fork, which I now have a pull request for. The pull request is still pending because that's what happens with open source. Sometimes you submit something and crickets. So, crickets. But I am interested in seeing how Redux works, particularly within the new hooks style. And I know I'm not using Redux correctly for hooks. And so I'm going to take a quick look at this more full application and sort of see what it's doing and talk about why my main reservations about Redux and how I think they can be addressed. I have this sort of brainstorm going on that I think that you could use Redux as is, and add just a little bit something new, which basically equates to syntactic sugar, but it's a library in between which can reduce Redux code by, I don't know, 2/3, I'm guessing, because Redux code is duplicative by about a factor of 3. So let's just dive in and see if any of my suspicions are correct. I may or may not actually build any of the code today. I might just be exploring concepts and writing out pseudo syntax about how this thing might work. So we'll just see here how this works. So first of all, I wanted to go over here and take a look at, so this is VS Code, and this is the actual, look, node modules don't need that. This is the React Redux real world example source. So I'm going to plug into the source here. And so my problem with Redux is there's so much boilerplate just to get to do something basic, like this whole file. This whole file is completely 100% unnecessary. There's no reason for this file to exist. We clearly want all the reducers in the reducer directory to get combined. Full stop. I would be curious about good example cases where you want to do something slightly different than this, and maybe they exist, but the reality is that they convention over configuration. Almost always you kind of have these different things, which I call models, which is the old school MVC, model view client way of thinking the world. I am more of a model view person in my preferences. I think that really it makes sense to split your client-side logic into your model and your view. And in this case, the model is React and the view is React. The model is Redux. And models are broken up by the type of data that they deal with. So model overall is all of these models, but usually you take that model and you break it up into separate models, one for each kind of data. And here it's pretty straightforward. We have an article data type, we got an article list, we have an auth, common, editor, home, profile settings, router. That's great. That's a good organization. And there's no reason to have all this extra work here of, see, like these two things are getting imported from the standard libraries. These things are just saying, bring everything in from the reducer directory and put them all in the and combine them into a reducer. That is an example of poor design, in my opinion, because it is emphasizing capability over effectiveness. So this is trying to say, well, a reducer just is a reducer. It just takes the React structure and creates a new React structure. Great. That's all React is, a Redux is, and then you can make this combination of reducers to break it up into different logical components so that this big reducer function can be managed. But that's not how, that's all a construct. That's all artificial for the real problems we're trying to solve, which is, I have articles. I want to be able to fetch the articles, I want to be able to update the articles, I want to be able to view the articles, and I want components to update when the articles change. We're not thinking about all of this reducer structure. All this reducer structure is artificial, so it should be minimized to the bare minimum. So, I have tools that allow me to do something like this. The main tool being Neptune namespaces, which would look something like this. We would just say, basically, import reducers, like that. And the tools would automatically made an index.js file for this directory, and then index.js file would have automatically imported all of these things. So that would automatically pull everything in with a single command. But then we have this problem of combining the reducers. And ultimately that needs to happen because we need to have this final combined reducer. And so we need some way of declaring a reducer like all of these guys to say, just automatically combine them with all the rest, rather than making this really obnoxious manual step. And that's what I'm going to play around with today. Again, that's actually how my framework works, which is artflux, which is a comparable thing to Redux, in that when you define something there, you define something like this. You say class, we'll say like article, extends, I'm just going to say flux model for right now. Usually you'll use some subclass of flux model, but it's a flux model. And then you do something like this. You'll do state fields, and you'll say, you'll say various things here. We're not going to dive into the declaration of how you design it, but so you declare it like that, and purely by declaring it like that, and then effectively hooking it up to your remote data store or the other sorts of things. And then this would automatically get exported from the file. This is all using CaffeineScript, my programming language, which is just JavaScript, but less code. Just that declaration does one little magical thing, which is that in CaffeineScript, there is a post-create hook that a class can implement. And so after the class gets created, CaffeineScript will invoke the post-create hook, which will then allow you to return whatever you want. And so what it does is a Flux model implements a post-create hook, which automatically registers the model. In my world, it's a registration step, but here we want to have it go into the combined reducers. I think we want something kind of similar to that. We want the declaration of the reducer to basically have a registration step, which goes and registers it to a standard tool, which builds this standard combined reducers for everything that was registered. So I think then we could do something like this. We could say import our reducers, and we're assuming that our reducers are declared in a way that registered them with some library that we would build. And then we would say something like this, export default combined registered reducers. So they have to be imported first because that's how they get registered. And then we could just have a single line like this that does the combination thing. And in fact, it might be so simple that we may not even need to put this in its own special file. We'd have to go look at where reducers.js is actually used, and maybe we would just use this directly inline in that file. This, of course, would have to come from somewhere, so we would probably say something like import that from redux-reduced, which is my pet project name for this thing. I've not grabbed it yet, so maybe someone else grabbed it, or it might already exist, but it's kind of ironic because Redux is about reducing things. That's what reducers are. But my goal is to reduce it. So you could have something that looks like this in exactly this file, and it would be, that's all you would need here. And so this file that requires custom editing, you have to add and remove things whenever you add a new reducer type. It's just a lot of stuff that slows you down and makes your framework more brittle. It makes it harder to change in light of refactoring. This should all be automatic. How do you know when things are brittle? You know when things are brittle. The biggest clue is when you see duplicate code. So like here, all right, this word article shows up here, here, and all of them are the same thing. They're all referring to the same thing, they're all talking about the same thing, but we have triplication, not just duplication, triplication going on here in terms of our code, which means that should article change its name? Of course, there's other files that also need to be changed, but this file alone has to have 3 updates that are excessive. Versus if this file looked like this. If the file looked like this, it would require 0 updates, which is a major improvement. And this is what I talk about well-designed programming tools. Well-designed programming tools, the best designed programming tools don't exist. They don't exist in the sense that they remove a whole category of things that you don't even have to worry about anymore. And so they don't exist in your code, I guess is the better way to put this. And this is what this largely does. This would say this whole bit is taken care of for you in the standardized library, so it does not ever have to exist in your code. So you've now reduced the amount of code you have to maintain for your own custom library. So continuing right along, let's go look at one of these reducers and think about how we might have it get registered. And if we're calling our little thing called redux-reduced. So let's go look at one of these reducers. So let's go over here and let's go to article. And it's not so unreasonable. It's like this long. This is going to be another part of how I'm going to show. This is where I think actually we'll make this much more lightweight. And so we'll take a look at that in a moment. But let's just focus on the current thing, which is, let's assume that we do this. Instead, we say register reducer. That's assuming that we've got this implemented in this redux-reduce thing. Then it really could look like this. Register reducer, and it is just a function invocation like that. And so that's all we would have to do to change these reducer declaration files. And then if we change this overall reducer file to just this and remove everything else, that's all gone, then you can start to see how this might actually really streamline your code and make it much more agile. So now each individual reducer deals with its registration aspect. And we don't have to worry about this centralized file, which kind of makes things brittle. So I think that's a cool improvement. And again, this is all theoretical. I've not made this redux-reduced library. But we might start looking at what it might look like. So let's just do that for fun. All right. What are they using for there? They're not really doing it. So they're doing it this way. All right. Well, that's fine. I have opinions about naming schemes, but I want to try to stay consistent with the naming scheme of this library right now for what we're doing. So let's say we've got these 2 things that we're looking at, register reducer, and we also have this combined reducers. So register reducer is going to take a reducer, and combined reducers is going to take nothing. I know, you're complaining. So, right now, we're just going to keep it super simple. The registry is just going to be an array. So this is a really simple function. We just say registry.push reducer, and then we say combine the reducers needs to basically do this step, right? and it needs to return that. So we're exporting here, where we're going to say const, we're going to say it actually just return. That's just totally fine. In fact, since it's just a single function, we don't even need to do any of this. It's going to look like this. So the reducers need to be named. So that's our first little hiccup here, right? So what is the complaint here? My gosh, it's embarrassing. I don't know my JavaScript syntax. Okay, it likes that better. All right. So this is actually, they are all named. Router is router reducer, and we don't have a router up here. That's fine for right now. I'm going to assume that this actually is going to be a separate file. And we're going to move this, rename up a directory. Oh, really? That's something you can do in Sublime Text. I'm still learning code, learning VS Code, but in the Sublime Text you can move things by just saying a rename function there. Can I drag and drop it? Are you sure you want to move that? Yeah. Thank you. All right, that's better than Sublime Text. Sublime Text is kind of weird because you have to know your pathing, but here you just drag it. I'd say out of the two, VS Code for the win. All right, redux-reduced. So we can't push it, right? It's got to be named. I think we can make this smarter, but for right now, we're going to just change this a little bit, and we're going to say name reducer. So now it's even, it's just like this. It's just that's the name equals reducer. Yay! So now, that's what it looks like. In fact, this is a full library. Good design, folks. Good design. All right, let's go on. So let's go and look at, we're looking at article. So now we can't do this. We actually have to say article, like that. And now we have that. The one thing that is now missing is that this router reducer, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to do this. New file. Yeah, we'll fine. Call it router.js. And it's going to be export default equals that. And it's going to be that. No equals, sorry. So now we have that, but what we need to do, though, is we do actually need to, now since we're going to be converting things to this new way of doing stuff, we're going to have this. And it's called just the router. So it looks like that. And this is now up a directory, just to be clear, and so is this. So it feels like we're maybe backsliding a little bit because now we have to add this in also. So now we've added approximately this much additional syntax to each one of these files, which is arguably getting close to comparable, but it's not really, right? So we've added one additional reference to the word article and we removed 3. So that still is a pretty big win. However, it's still duplicative because the name of the file is article. How do you get around that? Well, this is another place where my Neptune namespaces comes in. Neptune namespaces will create an index.js file, and it will import all the modules in this directory, and it will import them and link them into a structure where they are named by the name of the files in that directory, which means that we could eliminate this redundancy. In fact, we could actually register each of those reducers on that common file in a single step without any special code other than one bit of code which goes and says, here's an object which maps name to reducer, register all of them, and we can make our registration tool just accept either a single name reducer, or we could say, I need to export all these things too, of course. These are not being exported, but I'll say register reducers, and we could say reducers. And then we could say registry equals registry reducers. Something like that. And that would totally work. I know it's a little bit hand wavy there, but we don't have that. We're not using Neptune namespaces here. By the way, we could use Neptune namespaces here and it would work just fine. All it does is scan your source directory and it creates these index files and these namespace files. So you have this automatic namespacing system, but I'm trying not to add dependencies to this system right now. But just point being that we could essentially actually make these files so we wouldn't have to add anything we did all, right? So I could actually make it so that would just work. The original file as is would just work because the name is in the file, and then we could have an external thing which says grab all of the modules that are in the reducers directory and call register reducers on that whole map. All we would need to do is plug in Neptune namespaces for that. That's an NPM. It's available. You can take a look at it. Neptune-namespaces. But I'm not going to add any other requirements right now other than our redux-reduced, which incidentally we'll stay consistent like that. Maybe I'll actually try to run this. Maybe not. I think it should be an NPM, and it might be called redux-reduced, in which case this would look like that, of course. But right now, it is going to look like that. Thank you. All right, so that looks pretty cool. So we do have to add a little bit of weight here to these files in order to essentially eliminate this file. Let's find out where reducer is imported from. I believe I can do it like this. Reducer. I'm guessing it's going to look a little bit like that. And can I put on some regex? There. So we're importing the reducer here, and then we're just creating the store right here. So this really, we could probably eliminate that whole file. Where's store.js? Found right here. And so really, we don't actually need this file at all anymore. So we can just go in here, and I think the right answer is this. We import the reducers, we import combined reducer, and then we just do this. Bam. All right, which means that this file logically is now gone. I've got this all checked into Git, so I can just sort of edit willy-nilly like this and moving right along. So already that's what redux-reduce has gotten for us. It's eliminated a whole file, and we have not gone through and done all of these yet. I'm inclined to go ahead and create that index.js file. It's not going to be exactly like the one that Neptune namespaces would generate, but it's going to have basically the same functionality. And I think it'll allow us to not have to do this additional legwork that we're doing right here on every file. It'll be a little bit duplicative because we'll have to list article twice for each entry. Let's just take a look at it. When in doubt, play. This whole example is playing. So here we go. Index.js, it's going to look a little something like this. We're going to say export, and we're just going to export an object, and we're going to say article, and I wish I was a little bit more familiar with. I'm not a fan of the new ES6 imports because look at this. That's all it really needs to be, but this isn't going to work because we're using ES6 imports. I don't think that actually works. But we can get away with close to it. All right, import article from that, and now we have triplication again, right? This is just a proof of concept. I don't think this is actually how it should be. And it's not, we don't have to have it require then one small benefit. But this file can be automatically generated, and it should be automatically generated, and that's basically what Neptune namespaces does. But we're not going to do this for this project. So we can go through all of these and article list. Notice this is all highly duplicative and totally unnecessary. Let's do auth. Why does that get singled out? That's weird. Common. Is it because I'm not using it? I'm not a big fan of hints that are not relevant to making it work, like hints about this is an unused variable. People get kind of obsessed about the unused variable thing. I mean, it's good to clean them up for sure, but it's not good to distract you while you're doing your work. There's a time and a place for all these things. Again, all this could and should be auto-generated, so you don't have to edit or maintain this file. With Neptune namespaces, I decided to actually generate the index.js file. It generates it and puts it in the directory for you because I wanted kind of transparency about what it was doing. But I don't really love that it leaves an artifact around. I had explored the possibility of letting Webpack, somehow making a Webpack plugin that would just generate these files as Webpack built your site. I still kind of like that a little bit, but I wanted it to work in just plain Node.js and Webpack for my baseline. And what if you're using some other thing? Then you wouldn't be able to use it. So if I just make the files, it works everywhere and it's transparent. It just creates an index and a namespace JS file in every directory, which is a little bit heavyweight, but there's so much wins there that it's totally worthwhile. Router. And last but not least, settings from settings. So we can do all that, and now we just do header, home, profile, router, settings. So this file should you guys know my opinion here, but that should generally work. Again, I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants, but then what we're going to do here is we're actually going to say, instead of exporting that, we're not even going to bother to export that. We're just going to do this. We're going to go up to, just here because we have it here. And that is right. It probably shouldn't be plural. It probably should be a method. Combine them, and then we go over here, and it should be combine them. And then we're going to come back over here, and we're going to go to the top. We're going to copy this, because that needs to go up here to the index.js. This is not something that, this is for this example right now specifically. But we don't want to combine them right here. Although we could. In fact, we can just combine them directly right here. We don't have to go through the registration step at all. So there's a couple options on here on how to make this happen. But since this file, again, I think this file should be auto-generated. If it's auto-generated, it's not going to be Redux specific. So we're now making this file Redux specific by doing what we're doing here. In which case, we actually can eliminate the need for redux-reduced entirely, because we can just do combined reducers directly. We don't even have to do anything here with the registry aspect. So let's do that. Sometimes good code doesn't need a library. So I'm just going to do that directly here. We're going to say export default, that one. And we just need to import the right thing. And this just needs to be import reducers from reducers. Yeah, no, it's not used. So whiny. All right, for clarity, I don't really love the new ES6 methods, but let's do it this way. I think it looks like this. And we go up here to this index. Instead, we're going to say export reducer. Slightly embarrassing. I don't know how to do this. No, it's not really that embarrassing. It just is the way it is. Export default. How do you export non-default? You guys both know that I don't. JavaScript ES6 export example. Go to MDN because MDN rocks. Export function. Higher results, defaults, exporting destructured assignments with renaming, renaming exports, export list. We can export function, export class, or a let name and a set. I guess we'll just do the let name set method. So much unnecessary syntax for what was. I mean, the Node.js way of doing it was just really nice. So I say we say let reducer equals this. I think that is the way to do it. And we just need to pull in this function now. So redux-reduced is not really necessary to achieve this particular goal. Oh no, now I'm not. Now I've lost my code for how to do that. Yeah, I'm sure you're freaking out here. Let's do this full screen, and we're going to split horizontally. In fact, actually, we're going to go ahead and put this on the left. And get status. And we're just going to take a look at the deleted file because it has the answers for me. I just want to know how to import that. Thank you. All right, so now this actually should have had that in the first place anyway. Nope, it's not reduced rather. I just dot the wrong thing. It's all right. It is combined reducers. That's the one, but we probably will. I don't know. We'll see if we need to come back to that. This does not need it more. The index.js does. Index.js here. Yes, this is the one. Another thing I like to do, just the way I like to structure my files, is I like to import things by their most standard and most general first. So this is coming from a standard library. These are all my local files. So I always import stuff from, if it's a built-in Node tool, I would put those imports first. If it is a NPM registered library, I would import those second. And then if it's a local file within this current repository, I'd import those third. I think that really helps clarify the structure of your file and the who's responsible for what. So there we go. So now we have this file. Notice we still have triplication, right? Common, common, common 3 times. And as I've described, that can be completely eliminated with a tool like Neptune namespaces. It also could be eliminated if we wanted to register each one of these files separately, alter them, which I'm not saying I'm not going to do yet because this file is heinous. This is my main problem with Redux, is the way this file works. And we will be working on that in a moment. And it's possible that when we build the library framework to streamline creating this file, that we will no longer that will build in the registering part as part of it automatically, and therefore it'll make sense to move back off from this particular solution. But this solution is still arguably almost identical to the file we replaced. It is arguably replaced that file. It streamlines a little bit because having done it in the directory itself, it reduces the amount of redundancy here because they were pathing in with every single one of these things. You should never. I consider directories themselves to be a container, and you should never reach inside containers. That's one of the OO principles. I forget what the name of it is, but it's just a law of abstraction. When you have an abstraction, you should only use the official public interface for that abstraction. You should not ever reach within it. And they were doing that because they were in the outside of the reducers directory and they were reaching into the reducers directory. Instead, now we're just including, we're down here in settings, settings store. We are now just pulling in the reducers as a whole chunk, and the index.js is worrying about what happens inside reducers. And so reducers is responsible for itself. We've now encapsulated responsibility into reducers, even though ultimately, with a half an hour amount of poking around, we have not really changed much. But you've sort of heard my arguments. I kind of feel like after all this, Neptune namespaces. I should just at least show real quick here. So this is Neptune namespaces. It's an NPM, but purpose, dry up your modules. And it is using CommonJS as opposed to the new style. I don't think that should actually trip you up very much. But I had to play around a little bit to see. But there's no reason why it couldn't support modern, the ES6 import style as opposed to CommonJS. I'm not even going to say modern. They're both valid and they're both legal. CommonJS is just better. I know I will get some objection to that, but CommonJS is simpler and less complicated and less syntax. I find it hard to argue against that. So yeah, this tool does this. It looks at this directory and then it goes and it creates a couple of files so that you can import them as modules. And it's a lot of winning. So back to where we were. Sorry for the city sirens going on out there. Let's go focus on the meat of the problem here, which is this. Terrible, terrible, terrible thing. Let's talk about duplication, shall we? How many times does that show up in the source? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times? How many times does it really matter that it's showing up in the source? All right, here we're importing it. That's duplicate. So we're doing it twice here. So that's 2 times too many. Here, this whole file, action types file, is totally travesty. I mean, look at this. How duplicated do you get? It's twice on the same line, and there's nothing else in that line that has any semantic meaning. And then down here in our reducer, where we are also totally duplicating, like we're having it twice here for no particular good reason. What should we do here? How should we re-envision this? So the reducer takes in a state and an action to apply. If that action is an action it knows what to do with, it creates a new object with the changes. That's all Redux does. I mean, that's why people like Redux, is it's a very simple concept. You have this global state thing, and you have a reducer, which is just something that looks for a message, which is this article page loaded thing. And if it sees that message that it understands, it does a mutation to the state that is what's expected. That's part of, so action has a type, and action can have other things. And I even wonder how much Redux cares about the structure of that action thing. I think they're expecting dot types, right? Because if action let's assume we stay with this structure, that the action has a dot type field, and then it has your additional thing, like dot payload, right? We're not going to change that structure, although even that seems a little bit excessive. What's really happening here? When we trigger a change for Redux, we are somewhere in our code, which is here. Map dispatch to props. It's just like, why? On click. So we have an on click here, and then it has a dispatch, which dispatches here. So on click triggers this, and then it calls dispatch, but dispatch is, I'm a little confused about where dispatch is going through. So where's connect going here? Oh, connect's way down there. It's like, holy camole, how much piping do we need in order to say, when you click, we're going to do the dispatch. And I get confused because doesn't that dispatch mean that? And then wouldn't that then be just like a feedback cycle? It must not be. Map dispatch to props must do that. So all we really want is on click. Oh, we have this del functions here. So on click, it's going to take this payload, which I don't know. I'm going to just go ahead and just change this right here. That's bad coding in my opinion. You should not create named variables that are only used once. There's just no need for it. There we go. Because it's duplicated, right? We named that variable and then we used it. So we had 2 copies of a variable that was completely unnecessary, period. So not only did we didn't deduplicate, we eliminated 100% by bringing it out there. The only justification I can think of is it makes it explicit what that parameter is, but the sort of the nature of parameters with functions is you kind of need to know what parameters go in what slot, right? They didn't bother to name what this was, I guess because it has common ID, so they presumed that was assumed invisible. I think creating extra code just to explain things doesn't make sense. It should be a comment, and I have a whole set of opinions about that. Your code should absolutely be minimized across the board, particularly things like that, like things that, like if one changes its spelling, then the other one's going to break. Bad. So really what we want is on click, and all we want to do on click is we want to tell, we want to trigger the delete comment function. We want to queue it up for applying to the global state with Redux, which I assume is this dispatch call, but I'm just perplexed by the fact that those names match up. Because oh, no, I just can't read new JavaScript. I'm sorry. This is the input parameter. So it passes in dispatch and then invokes it. Dispatch. Okay, no big deal there. But doesn't React Redux have a dispatch you can call directly? I imagine it does. I'm just going to theorize that that exists so we could do something like this, right? Let's just go take a look, I suppose. Redux API. Is this really, could you just give me an API definition? Select connect. Where's connect? Can you just tell me what the definition of connect is? There's connect. Already connect advanced. What we want is actually dispatch. Oh my gosh. See, this is where I kind of get into a little bit of a quibble with Redux. The basic idea is fine. It's easy. It makes sense. But someone had to go and make it complicated. Inject, inject, inject. Like, why are we doing freaking injectors? Props, store children. Examples, vanilla React. But I really just want connect, and that's provider. Really? Really? Well, I must have to use connect, right? I don't want React Redux. I just want Redux. So I might have to sort of think about how this works here, because this is a whole bunch of things that guarantees it's going to be way too complicated. Let me show you what I'm thinking. Since we only have 15 more minutes here, let's just see what this looks like. I am thinking that we should do something that looks a little bit more like this. So we're just going to edit this file with reckless abandon. Yeah, I kind of know what this is doing. And again, it's trickiness. But the trickiness can largely be avoided if we're using hooks. So we're going to just assume hooks and then make this much nicer. Again, it's going to be hand wavy. It just has to be hand wavy right now because I don't quite know quite enough about the actual API for React and React Redux. Redux. Can access Redux directly or React Redux. But there's something. This does something like this, so I'm just going to hand wave it for right now. So here is our actual delete function here, and what we're going to do is we're going to say let subscribed state set subscribed state equal, and this is where we would use a tool that we're going to pretend exists. Import subscribe from redux-reduced. You know, I should go look because I know that React has some of this now available with hooks. Let's go look. React Redux hooks. Using a useSelector function. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that, actually. For subscribing to state, that's pretty cool, I must admit. So that's subscribing for state. We're not going to worry about that too much right now. What I'm more interested in is the invoking the difference. But that's actually about what I was about to do. I was about to do exactly what useSelector already does, which is actually just available right there already, if we have the new React Redux. So useSelector pulls in this if we're pulling out counter out of the state. One of my big problems with Redux is, you can avoid this, but it doesn't really give you any constraints to any built-in infrastructure to do this, is that counter. Really, we've got a single global variable called counter in our global Redux state that is really about the same as just throwing it in the big global namespace. What if we need another counter? What do you do, counter 2? The problem is it's not, everything is in this big shared namespace, which is the which is the Redux structure. That in itself is probably not a problem, but it really should, they should provide tools so that you can mix and match modules better. So that if I just pull in someone else's whole code base that is like a plugin, it's got its own Redux state, its own React components, and guess what? It also uses counter. And we have a namespace clash. And that's a problem with Redux. And I know I'm not the only one to say this, but it's a pretty major design flaw. And honestly, my art flux has a little bit of that design flaw in that you create these named models, and these named models are kind of like something in between here, which might be the zipper module .counter. So it would look a little bit more like that. It provides one level of namespacing, but who's to say that two people might not both use the word zipper? In fact, names like user is perfectly reasonable, and it's quite reasonable. You might have two different things that both use user that shouldn't be bumping into each other. So I've got some ideas on proving that with my stuff. Anywho, I like the solution. That's great. And I'm glad that hooks makes that make so much more sense. Go hooks. But it still belies the fact that this whole invocation thing. So what I would like to see is this. So onClick is an action. And we're not, it's a freaking props action, no less. This is just so bad. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. We don't need this at the moment, so we'll just ignore that. We're going to get rid of that craziness. But I do need to see what it looks like. So it looks a little bit like this. I really care about just dispatch. And so on click, we're just what I really think you want this to look like is something like this. So delete comment. First of all, where's the delete comment defined? It's actually used as article. So imagine if it looked like this. Here's what we're getting down to. Article dot delete comment. What if it looked like that? What if all of that stuff I just eliminated? In fact, now let's go ahead and just clean this up a little bit. We're going to call this the final version here. It just needs to be exported, is the only thing. Export default. In fact, we don't even need delete button as a name because that's not really necessary. What are you complaining about? Are you complaining about something? Oh, you're just complaining about what was deleted, that's all. No worries. So first of all, I want to go and just compare these two files. So we're going to undo all the way back to the beginning, and then we're going to select all and replace it. So 22 lines versus 28 lines of code. And for what? For not much. Although technically it should have one more thing here. It should say import. We're going to have to import there's a couple ways we can look at this. I would probably lean towards doing this. Import models from redux-reduced. So it would look like that. And then we'd say models.article.delete comment. All that's going to do is it's going to do what Redux already does. It's going to go and do a queuing up of a delete. It's going to do a dispatch. That's what they call it. It's going to dispatch delete comment, and it's going to dispatch it with these proper fields attached to the dispatch object. But one, we've reduced our number of uses of delete comment down to that much, and we made it look like really what it is. It's a function. We're invoking change. We're triggering verb action. So that streamlines it quite a bit. Now the other half of the equation, which we only have 5 minutes left in this cast, so I'm not really going to go into it that much, but imagine, if you will, if we go over to, there we go, over here to the article, no, article, oh my gosh, where are the components? Producers, article, here we go. So this file is all kind of big and gobbledygook. So imagine, if you will, if instead of this gobbledygook, it looked something like this. Class article extends module, import module from redux-reduced, extends, not module, model, and we have to export it, right? Export default that. And then we just say static delete comment. God, I'm getting the syntax right. I don't work in this world of JavaScript because I use Caffeine script because it's better. Because it's way less syntax. So I'm just remembering my ES6 as we're going along here. Delete comment. Where's delete comment? It looks like this. So delete comment is going to take state and action as inputs, right? State action. Oh, I wonder, does this? We'll do the same. We'll do the defaults. Fine, whatever. Action, but type. But we call that action delete comment does care about this. Comment ID. Comment ID is only used once. All right, I just have lots of objections here. So the people who implemented this, first of all, shouldn't do this at all. We should just do this. But second of all, if you're going to do this, do it like this. You can reduce the assignment by 1 by using good old JavaScript's built-in awesome new stuff from ES6. Great, but we're going to just go use it directly here, because that's the better way to do it. So, to delete comment, yes, I know what the problem is here, thank you. Oh my gosh, my syntax problem, sorry. I mean, I see what it's doing. It doesn't, we're not returning the right thing, but I was trying to think of how can we do this the most streamlined ES6 way. I think we can use a fat arrow in a static definition, maybe. Leaving it at the moment. Exercise to the reader. So we declare delete comment like this instead of like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines there. That's all good, but we also eliminate that entirely. We don't need that anymore. We don't need to switch on action type. It's already using OO dispatch. So we have prototypes in JavaScript. Prototype OO, at its most fundamental, is a dispatch mechanism. You can select an object, and then you can invoke a method on it, which is basically invoking dispatch. So we have already built in dispatch into JavaScript. So instead of building our own dispatch on top of JavaScript, use JavaScript's dispatch. So the result would be, I mean, we do have 3 other ones to write, but they're all about the same length. The result would be this. Let's just presume that they're all about the same length. It'd be this versus this travesty that we have right here. So we've got 35 lines versus 28 lines. Plus, these are much more straightforward. We totally eliminated the need to have these constants, which are duplicated all over the place. We can then, of course, completely just remove this entire action types file, gone. And then we have this file, which we're working on right here. Delete button, not delete button. Where were we? We were on articles, action types, yes. And it looks like this. And arguably, I mean, we personally actually really like one-liners, even if it makes the file a little bit long. Sometimes I think it's worthwhile for simplicity's sake, because look at that really reduces the code noise. And incidentally, just because I have to do this, here's what it would look like in CaffeineScript. We'll just go ahead and edit the whole file, sure. We got to do this. So we're going to import redux-reduced. We'll just, it's flexible. We can do it either way, but we're going to do it like that for now. It's going to be super bitchy as I do this, but that's all right. We're going to do that. We're going to do that. We're going to do that. Gosh, oh, it's auto-indenting, of course it is. Because it's like, I don't understand the syntax. That's what it would look like in CaffeineScript. Seriously. Import would automatically import the right things. It does that for us. The last line of your code is automatically exported, and then you just do it like this. However, we're in JavaScript, and I'm all right with ES6 is better than nothing. Definitely an improvement. So we have this file, and yeah. We'll leave it like this for now. So how is this magic happening? We would still need a single additional step here. which I'm doing a little bit of hand wavy, but we would need to invoke something which would declare these things. Actually cause these to get registered, all of these dispatch actions. And it could look like this. I don't even know what they call them. They gotta probably have a name for them. Is this my search now? That's not a very useful search. I call them action types. Let's call them actions. Register action. I'm just gonna call it actions for the heck of it. Suppose we had a function that was defined in model called actions, and it looked more like this. I prefer to use the class syntax, and in C++ in caffeine script, I would use the class syntax, but ES6 class syntax has some limitations. Shame on it. That I'm just not going to try to address here. But we can do this. Yeah. Oh my gosh, with the indentations. You do not need to indent. I guess we're missing a close curly. That's why it's so bitchy. Got it. My bad. Another reason why I do not use closed curlies. So we could do it like this, and this would work. We could have an implication that looked like this. And in fact, I think in this case, we can actually do this. Right? Can we do this? Is that? No. Just JavaScript. All right. We'll do that at the moment. I think there might be a streamlined way to actually just make this a return value because we're only doing a single value here. Like what if I, oh my gosh, I want to try. What if we wrap these into parentheses? Does it let me do this? Yes, if I wrap them in parentheses, it lets me do that. All right, so that's definitely an improvement there. Besides your nature of auto-indenting for me. Oh my gosh, I already like this file a lot better than the old file. I bet you can tell why. I like reducing the syntax. And here I am going over, it's 234. So I think we'll try to wrap this up. So article.actions could be a declarative thing. So it could go through, and this is just an object, it can go through and look at the name of each of these things. It can automatically create us an action type, which will probably look something like article _ delete comment. It would be namespaced, but otherwise it would still be delete comment just like before. So that you can use all of your normal Redux tools. They understand that that is the action type. It would also create our actual reducer switch function. So it would create the function that acts as that old switch function way back when, right? It would create this actual reducer. It would create this function for us based upon this data. I still think I'm going to build this library. I think that actually might work really well. And because, yeah, we can do this. Some people might object to that, but look at that. I mean, that is just so much less code than the previous version. And I think that we could probably even still improve this even further. But I'm not gonna try to push it too much more here. So it could do all those things. And we end up having, I know I've got quadruplications here, but these are actually 3 different functions, right? These were the 3 different functions that were here originally, just pretending. One mention of delete comment here, and then literally over here where we use it in the components, in the delete button, one mention of delete comment here. So article would be a model. I'm pulling out of this like model registry, which is how I handled it in ArtFlux, but we don't even necessarily need a model registry. This could just be the same file that we're looking at here. This could be it. It could be the article class that you're just touching right there. This actions thing implements the static methods for delete comment 1, 3, 4, static class methods, which then, this is exactly what you're calling, would be that static class method. And that would then do the dispatch to Redux for you. So it batches up both of the incoming and the outgoing aspects of Redux, which is, I guess, it's the whole dispatch. So it's painful to dispatch something to Redux right now. And then it gets in the dispatch queue, and then it's painful to actually do your reducer. This would streamline the code dramatically. And again, I think that I might just have to build this now that I've described it all to you. So this is where I'm going to sign off for today. Again, I'm Shane Brinkman-Davis. I am working with GenUI.com, and my own company, Kimmy. I built ArtSuite.js, ArtSuite.js, and Caffeine Script are my two big projects in the open source world. And please check those out. If you like this, please subscribe, like, give me a comment. I am working on, this is my first actual live stream. I'm live streaming this, no one's here. But I am going to try to work on actually live streaming. I'm live streaming on Twitch, which is username Shane B as in Beta Davis, Shane B Davis. And I'm also going to be posting it on YouTube. And yeah, I always like to hear answer questions. So my big question is, does this interest you? Reducing this index to Redux dramatically, purely in just JavaScript, just with a little extra library called this theoretical React-reduced library. That cool to you? Do you think I missed something big with Redux? I am doing a little convention over configuration. I'm making a certain amount of assumptions that removes a little bit of the flexibility of Redux in lieu of making it more friendly for the flexibility of just getting code done as quickly as possible in a very standard, compliant, clean sort of way. I'm just taking the conventions that clearly people are using and codifying them and then eliminating code because it's not all using the convention rather than hand coding the convention. So I'm curious what you think about that. Coding over convention is a big thing for me. I'm curious what you think about that too. So answer in the comments. Do you like the idea of simplifying down your reducer to a declaration like this and eliminating all of those files where you name all those constants and reducing your invocation to just a method invocation on a class, which is what triggers the actual dispatch? Would that be a fun thing to do? Should I build this library? I think you can do it. I think that we got close enough that I could probably put it together in another couple hours. And I can't imagine it would be anything but beautifully good for your React Redux. In fact, I probably have some new projects coming up. They're going to be new greenfields, blue sky projects that you're going to use React and Redux, and I might argue for doing this. So we shall see. None of this is TypeScripted, but I don't see any reason why we can't TypeScript it all nicely as well. I got my own complaints about TypeScript because there might be, if we're using a tool to do declarations, that tool needs to be able to be really smart about its typing. So we'll set that aside for the moment. But I think it's doable. All right, cheers. Thank you for watching, hopefully later on YouTube. I know that there's no one here on Twitch at the moment, but I'm going to keep trying to do this. I think Twitch is where I want to do it. I would love feedback on if there's other good places, but I found a good tool. The OBS tool lets me actually stream from my desktop to Twitch. It's actually really nice. It's a pretty flexible tool. It let me do what I need to do. I can both record for YouTube later and also stream at the same time. It seems to have worked great. We'll have to take a look at what the results look like. But I'm curious what you think about just the technicals of how you do this sort of live coding kind of thing. And was it readable? Was it legible? I'd love to hear about that. If you were not able to read or see something, I'm still trying to refine the presentation. All right, cheers, thank you, and I will see you next time.